I swear I was just trying to fix up an old barn. You ever find yourself in a fight you never asked for just because you wanted to bring something beautiful back to life? Well, that's how this all started, a 150-year-old barn rotten in half, but a real treasure to me. The police, the sirens, the whole circus, yeah, I thought I was dreaming too. But it only got crazier from there, and at some point, it actually got fun. Ever see an entire neighborhood turn on its own HOA stick with me because what started as one stubborn old building spiraled into something none of us could have seen coming? So my name's Owen Hale. I restore old buildings for a living, mostly because I grew up around the kind of sawdust and splinters that get under your skin in a good way. My grandfather was a carpenter, ran a tiny workshop behind his house, and that smell of old wood and strong coffee still lives in my head. I remember standing on my tiptoes, his big hands over mine, pushing a wood plane across a hunk of oak. He'd say, "Easy, Owen. Let the wood tell you what it wants to be." That feeling making something real out of nothing, it stuck with me. So when I found a property with a barn older than the Civil War, I knew I had to have it. Not just for the building, but for what it meant. I saw every sagging beam and weathered nail as a living story. But apparently Margot Lacey, our self-declared HOA queen, didn't see it that way. Margot was 45, always put together, the kind of person whose smile feels more like a warning than a welcome. From the day I moved in, I knew she thought every inch of this neighborhood was her personal empire. The first time I met her, I was standing in my driveway daydreaming about how to save the barn when I heard those sharp heels coming at me like a metronome counting down to trouble. She looked me up and down and said, "You're the new owner. I hope you know the rules." Not a question, just a declaration. Now, I'm not naive, okay? Maybe I was then. I actually thought, hey, once she hears I'm restoring history, she'll be supportive. Yeah, right. I told her about my plans about keeping the barn's soul alive, even making the neighborhood worth more. She just gave me that tight little smile like a chess player who already knows how she's going to beat you. A week later, I get this letter from the HOA, one of those heavy official-looking envelopes that makes your stomach drop. It said my barn violated community aesthetic standards and needed to be addressed immediately. I laughed out loud, thinking, how can something older than the neighborhood itself violate the rules I called the HOA, thinking this was just paperwork confusion? Nope. The woman on the phone told me everything had to go through the architectural review board. I tried to explain I wasn't making changes, just restoring, but she repeated herself until I wanted to bang my head on the wall. So I spent that night at my kitchen table building a 15-page application, photos, plans, documentation, even letters from preservation groups. I thought, no way they turned this down. Boy, did I underestimate the game I'd stepped into. Turns out the review board was Margot, her brother-in-law Frank, and her best friend So Much for Fairness. I started to realize this wasn't about the barn at all. It was about power. Sure enough, Margot herself showed up at my door a few days later, folder in hand, perfume strong enough to fill the whole house. She walked in, pulled out the bylaws, and with a perfectly manicured nail, pointed to the clause, "No exterior modifications without board approval." I said I submitted everything. She just smiled tighter and handed me a cease and desist. I had 72 hours to stop work or face a $1,000 fine. I felt like a kid getting sent to the principal's office for breathing. For 3 days, I paced my house. I almost gave up. Legal fees would have drowned me and Margot would find some other way to ruin my life. Then I thought, if she wants to play the legal game, I can play too. I hit the town library, digging through old property records and development files until my eyes crossed. Just when I was about to give up, I found a dusty survey from the 80s listing my barn as a structure of significant historical value. It was official, signed by the town, and included in the local heritage registry. I double-checked with my neighbor, Arthur Reed, retired lawyer, sharp as ever. He looked it over and said, "Owen, this is a shield. The Heritage Preservation Act means Margot can't touch you." State law beats HOA bylaws, period. That afternoon, we prepped a formal notice to the board I'd be restoring my barn under state protection, and any interference was a violation of the law. The next HOA meeting was a circus. Margot strutted in folder clutch, looking more official than a senator. When it came to my violation, she put on a performance photos letters, even a timeline of my supposed crimes. When it was my turn, I presented the Heritage Preservation Act and the registry listing. The room went silent. Nobody moved. Margot's face turned a color I hadn't seen before, somewhere between beet red and panic. She tried to argue, but Richard, the actual HOA president, started reading my documents. People in the room were recording on their phones. Yeah, this was going viral in the group chat for sure. Margot cracked. She argued heritage laws didn't apply, that the barn was too old, that I needed more permits, anything she could grab. But the law was on my side, and eventually Richard had to call a recess because, well, she was losing it in front of everyone. I thought that would be the end. I called my contractor and got back to work feeling lighter than I had in weeks. That's when the sirens showed up, 2 police cars, lights flashing like I'd robbed a bank instead of fixing a roof. Turns out someone called in illegal construction anonymous, but I could see Margot standing in her yard with that gotcha grin. The officers looked at my paperwork, shrugged, and basically apologized for being dragged into a neighbor feud. The crowd of neighbors watched the whole thing play out, curtains twitching, people whispering. It was embarrassing, but seeing the cops realize Margot had used them for her own grudge was almost worth it. But Margot didn't back down. Over the next week, violation notices rained down on the whole neighborhood. Paint color, 2 light mailboxes an inch too high, sunflowers not on the approved plant list. It was like she declared war on everyone. I figured nobody would stand up to her, maybe just pay the fines, keep their heads down. But I was wrong. Tom Boyd, who runs the little grocery store, came to me with an $800 bill for changing his hand-painted sign. Then 5 more neighbors showed up holding citations. Turns out everyone was getting hit. People started comparing notes, and suddenly it wasn't just about my barn anymore. Then came the twist. Tom got a delivery receipt meant for the HOA, but delivered to his store by mistake, $8,000 worth of high-end furniture, all sent to Margot's house, billed as HOA office renovation. His wife remembered seeing the delivery truck at Margot's place. The dots started to connect: fake invoices, sudden enforcement of petty rules, and big purchases nobody voted on. Then Mrs. Dolores, the quiet HOA secretary, turned out to be the hero of the story. She'd been keeping her own binder of suspicious transactions for years. With Tom organizing, Dolores sharing documents, and half the neighborhood pitching in, we gathered evidence of $60,000 stolen by Margot from HOA funds, furniture, fake landscaping, phantom consulting fees. We called an emergency meeting. The place was packed and the air was electric. When Tom presented the evidence, Margot fell apart. No more rehearsed speeches, just pure panic. Dolores stood up and calmly walked everyone through the binder. The room erupted: calls to fire, Margot calls to bring in the police. Margot grabbed her purse and ran out, literally never looking back. In the aftermath, the board did a full audit. Margot was gone, forced to resign, her house sold below market to pay back some of what she'd stolen. The new board changed everything: oversight committees, transparent budgets, and thanks to an idea, I pitched a new fee system based on actual contribution to the community. Those who helped root out corruption paid less. Troublemakers paid more. My fees dropped by 60%, and for once I felt like justice was served. The barn got finished 3 months later, stronger than ever, and even featured in the Historical Society's newsletter. People actually wanted to walk by now to see what real history looked like. The best part: the whole neighborhood came alive. Folks started talking again, watching out for each other, fixing what was broken instead of hiding from it. And Margot, last I heard, she moved across town. I hope she learned something about what a real community looks like. As for me, I've got the prettiest barn in the county and enough saved on HOA fees to take a good vacation. You ever see your neighbors rally together to take down a bully Or maybe you fought your own HOA wars. Drop your wildest stories below. Because if this taught me anything, it's that one stubborn old barn can change everything if you stand your ground. And hey, sometimes legacy is just about doing what's right and letting the rest fall into place.